So we've got the Bills at home here, laying 5.5 against the Jags, total of 45.5. And I'll say this, if there's a team that looks good so far this season, it's certainly the Bills. I knew we had question marks about this offense without Stephon Diggs, but so far, Josh Allen's been pretty damn good. One of the best quarterback performances through 2 games of the year that I feel like we've seen across the board. In a year where quarterback play's really been down, so I think if there's a team that deserves to be laying this, it's the Bills, especially in primetime, especially at home. But Jenks, it's still a tricky number, and the Jags, we know they have some good pieces as well. So what was your initial read when you saw this line and this total?
I initially liked the Bills here, but I think I'm going Jags. I'm taking the Jags and the points. And we've seen the money come in on Jacksonville a little bit. I'm really banking on decent teams or good to pretty good teams in the NFL who are 0-2 that really need a win. And the Jags qualify for me. Now, I don't think they're some sort of world beater by any stretch of the imagination, but you could have made the case before the year that the Jags were a playoff team. Maybe they get a wild card or something. Now they're 0-2. They're going to Buffalo. They're getting points. They've got to have this win. The Bills have looked great through 2 games, but also they went down to Miami and took care of the Dolphins when Tua got knocked out of that game. Trevor Lawrence only has 1 touchdown pass over the first 2 games of the year. I just think this is too many points. Maybe the Bills win it. Wouldn't surprise me, but I think 5.5 is too much. I'm going Jacksonville.
This makes me nervous because I think what makes me nervous about the Jags is how they perform, namely in the second half of games. It feels like they're not a team that can hold on to some of these leads. And what we've seen from the Bills at home has been straight up dominance at home. And I know this is straight up, so it's a little different. But under Sean McDermott, Buffalo 41-9 in Orchard Park. So it makes me feel like maybe you put this in a parlay or something and you go Bills on the money line. But again, like, I don't love this game. Maybe you can look at some props here. We know James Cook has been really good so far this season for the Bills, but the Jags have been all right at stopping the run. So maybe that's a dead end there. And I think the problem is when it comes to receivers is that Josh Allen is so good at spreading the ball around that it kind of takes away, that number one receiver approach where you can say, okay, this guy's getting all the targets. He's going to be the guy to target in the props world. So I'm not sure where to go in this game. I'm glad we have 2, so I don't have to play anything. But before we move on to the next one, do you have a feeling on this total? I feel like this one could go either way. If it's a primetime game, I'm leaning towards the under 45.5. But again, both these teams have some electric playmakers. So that one makes me nervous as well.
Yeah, I get that. It's not my favorite game on the card, but you can make – this is one of those games where, of course, when the number is the number, you should be able to make a case for either side. Generally, you can. And when you can make a strong case for either side, whereas you don't necessarily have a real strong lean towards one, then I tend to stay away from that game. So I am going to stay away from this game, but I do like the Jags. I kind of like the over, too. And I know the trend is primetime unders, but the Bills, the one thing about the Bills that is surprising to me is that they have proven, because Josh Allen is such a wonderkind, that they can put up numbers without Stephon Diggs. And honestly, I think Josh Allen, particularly, not based on this one game, but if he has a strong season, I think we could see Josh Allen win MVP because he's being asked to do more than ever, and he's doing it. So I think it's going to be a back-and-forth game. Then conversely, look at the Jags, who so far this season have a bottom 5 passing defense in the NFL. The Bills are really banged up. And remember, the Cardinals put up 28 in the Bills in week 1. I think this game's going to go back and forth, and Josh Allen's going to be asked to play hero ball, which he is. So that goes into my handicap as well. I think it's going to be an exciting game, so I will lean to the over as well.
Yeah, of course Josh Allen's going to win MVP this year because this is the first year in the history of our show that we've not, picked him to win MVP preseason. So, of course, he's going to win this year. All right, so let's go on to the other game because it feels like we have not really, it's more tepid predictions when it comes to Jags and Bills. But I feel a little bit stronger on this Commanders and Bengals game. And Jenks, for the people at home, you're somebody who works on the broadcast for the Commanders, so you cover them intimately. You've got to sit down with some of the players, some of the coaches. So what was your initial read on this line? The Bengals laying 7.5. We know it's a desperation spot. The Bengals have yet to win a game. Total of 47 here. Do we think the Commanders can keep it close within a touchdown.
I don't think so. I don't think so, Chelsea. I know. So sad. I want them to, but also, and this is tough when you're dealing with fans and you work with the team because you want the team to win, obviously. At the same time, you have to be realistic about where this team stands right now, and they won 4 games last year. Huge win last week against the Giants, which, of course, on the outside looking in, you're like, oh, you beat the Giants, big deal. The Giants were a huge problem for this franchise for the past few years. Again, though, the Bengals are 0-2. They cannot afford to go 0-3. Absolutely not. And frankly, the Commanders got a little lucky last week against the Giants because on the first play of the game, the Giants lost their field goal kicker, Graham Gano. So for the rest of the game, the Giants had to go for it on 4th down because they just didn't. Their backup field goal kicker was their punter. He tried 1 extra point and missed. So it completely changed the Giants' game plan. Imagine if you don't have a kicker going into a game and it's supposed to be a close game. That's an absolute killer. So I'm glad Washington got the win. But in this spot, going into Cincinnati at night, taking on a Bengals team that absolutely is desperate, a very good Bengals team, this seems like the time when Cincinnati makes a statement. Yes, it's against the Commanders, but I'm going to play this down to 7 and lay the points. I really like this play a lot. Unfortunately, it goes against my team, but I think the Bengals are the right side tonight.
I think if there were a team that I wanted to trust as big favorites, it's still not the Bengals, though. Like, I still think that they win, but I feel like there is a chance that they let the Commanders hang around. And the Bengals have not been good at stopping the run. So I feel like Brian Robinson Jr. may have a pretty solid game here. And plus, we know Jaden Daniels can scramble for some yardage as well. So maybe that's how the Commanders stay in this game. Again, I don't think they win. I do think it's a desperation game for the Bengals. But for me, desperation spells something else in my mind, and that goes to quarterback rushing props. We talked about this with Lamar Jackson over the weekend. His team was 0-2 going into that game against Dallas. His rushing prop was 54.5. And what did he finish with? 87 rushing yards. And I get it. Joe Burrow is not Lamar Jackson, but also you don't get a Lamar Jackson line on Joe Burrow. His line tonight is 11.5 yards. He has hit this in one of his 2 games so far. He's gone for 9 and 15, but the carries have been there. He's ran the ball at least 4 times in each of those 2 games. And if you look at the Commanders, both opposing quarterbacks have had pretty decent games on the ground. Daniel Jones had 32. Baker Mayfield had 21. And again, this is a desperation play. Do you think if there's a first down there for the taking, that Joe Burrow's not going to scramble for those extra yards? I feel like he does. You know, he can get this in a couple rushes. So I feel like for me, desperation play, Joe Burrow over his rushing prop, 11.5.